Welcome to the Living Out podcast, helping people, churches and society talk about faith and sexuality.
Hello and welcome to a new series of the Living Out podcast. This series we're talking all about intimacy, which is something we end up talking about a lot at Living Out. We tend in our culture to conflate intimacy and sex. We put them together. We think they're the same thing. But at Living Out, we often will question if that is in fact the case. Are intimacy and sex the same thing? And spoiler, we would say no. Ed has just published a book on the subject called The Intimacy Deficit. And so we're going to spend this series talking about some of the themes in that book, exploring how we can experience and how we can enjoy intimacy. And the book just gives us a very helpful framework to do that. So we're going to have an introduction today where we're going to quiz Ed all about the book, why he's written it, and some of the core things he wants us to know. And then in this series, we're going to be talking about different kinds of intimacy that we can experience. Intimacy with God, intimacy with ourselves, intimacy with other people, and intimacy with creation. And we're going to be expanding on those ideas in Ed's book, involving more voices in the conversation, and hopefully helping all of us to deepen our experiences of intimacy. So that's where we're going in this series. That's where we're going today. We're quizzing Ed before he turns the tables and quizzes everybody else. To start us off, we've got Ed obviously in the room, and we've also been joined by Joe, who is on the Living Out team as well. And I'm going to start off by asking you guys, in a book-related theme, what is the best book title that you have ever come across? Ed, maybe I'll start with you.
Oh, thanks for it. This is one of those questions that's really I've enjoyed actually looking at my bookshelves, and were two ones that I've pulled off my bookshelf. One was a book that my mother gave me for Christmas one year, which is entitled "New Ways to Kill Your Mother." Which is fantastic.
Wow, she's brave.
Yeah, I think she gave it to both myself and my brother. And then also just any conversation about book titles, particularly Christian book titles, reminds me of the book that was published years ago in the early 90s. The first title was called The Last Word on Guidance. And then they wanted to update it, but they couldn't really update it because they called it The Last Word on Guidance. So it had to be changed to Guidance and the Voice of God. And I just love the fact that, if you're going to be stupid enough to produce a book called The Last Word and then want to do a new edition, you have boxed yourself into a corner.
Oh dear. Yeah, not so good. It's funny, I didn't look at my bookshelf at all when I read this question. Immediately I knew the best book title that I have ever come across, and that is a book that I bought when my children were probably 5, 4, 2 and X months, 6 months, something like that. And the book title is What Mothers Do, Especially When It Looks Like Nothing. And I didn't even really need to read the book. It was just the title that warmed my heart, because I was like, yes, I go around every day and I just feel like I get nothing done. What is it that I'm actually doing? And it was just lovely to think that I'm mothering. That's what I'm doing every day. All day, every day, I'm mothering my children, and that was enough.
Excellent. Love that validation. I panicked when I read this question because I have read so many books, and it felt like a very high pressure question to try and find the best book title I've ever come across. I have settled on one from C.S. Lewis because I'm currently rereading the Chronicles of Narnia. So book number 3, The Horse and His Boy. I love it because you'd expect it to be the boy and his horse, but the fact that it's the horse and his boy is just an intriguing twist on the title. And it's a fantastic book, so if you haven't read it, do go and read it.
There you go. So, Ed, perhaps we could start right at the beginning. Why is your latest book called The Intimacy Deficit?
Well, I've written 3 books, and the first one was called The Plausibility Problem. The second one was called Purposeful Sexuality, and I was talking to somebody about why the first one had sold quite a lot and the second one hadn't sold that many. And he said, because he's quite a cynical Englishman, he said the first one started... basically the first book title, Plausibility Problem, it's basically there's a problem to be solved, and that's what people like. That's why people buy books. And the problem about purposeful sexuality is just too positive. Just saying, and nobody wants to be positive. So I thought, okay, third book title, let's go back to a problem to be solved, and the intimacy deficit would seem to be, well, basically saying, look, there's a problem, and read this book, solve the intimacy deficit problem. I'm also hoping to trap a few people in who'll think, yeah, intimacy is all about sex, and this is the answer to their lack of a sex life or all their problems in a sex life. I hope they'll buy the book and then actually be trapped into discovering that actually it's not about that at all.
So you're just tricking people. That's excellent.
Well, there's a little bit of deception going on. This is slightly embarrassing, isn't it? Yes.
That's fine. Let's be upfront about it. So what would you say to people who might come to you and say, Ed, haven't you just written and talked enough about sex? Why another book?
Yeah, and and I'd say, well, you need to read it and find out it's actually not about sex. And the first paragraph is basically saying this is not a book about sex. So even those that pick it up and think it's all about sex from the cover, as soon as they read the first paragraph, will read me saying, a book about intimacy isn't actually a book about sex. We do in our culture today equate sex and intimacy. So people talk about, intimate relationships, and we're all immediately thinking, oh, that means a sexual relationship. I'm wanting to help us all just get a sense that actually intimacy, a deep sense of connection or oneness with other people, can come through sex, but can also come through friendship. It can also come through a relationship with God. It can also come through just actually a better sense of who you are, and us feeling more at ease in our own skins. It can also come in a job. It can also come in a walk through a beautiful valley, and a whole host of other things. So I'm trying to broaden the definition of intimacy and rescue it from just being something you experience in the bedroom.
That sounds great. Yes, I remember reading that at the beginning about removing intimacy from the bedroom and putting it back where it belongs in other contexts, in other relationships in life, which sounds great. So you've got various chapters in the book, and you talk there about intimacy with creation and intimacy with yourself and with others. Are they sequential? Would you consider these different contexts for intimacy to be one after the other? What's the most important?
Well, I've got these 4 categories. So intimacy with God, intimacy with self, intimacy with others, intimacy with creation. And in some ways, they are... I mean, some ways... Well, yeah... They basically come together as a package. And so another possible book title was actually called The Intimacy Quadrant, which made it sound a little bit like a sci-fi thing, so we didn't go for that. But what I've got right at the end of the book is basically a sort of a table, a quadrant, which is trying to make the point that actually we need all 4, and that all 4 contribute to each other. So to illustrate, perhaps as Christians we are thinking rightly, intimacy with God is the most important. Enjoying a close relationship with God is key. But I don't think we understand enough that actually if we really want to do that, we'll probably need to be developing our intimacy with others, because I don't know about you, some of my best experiences of God have been singing with others, or hearing another person explain God's word, or just chatting about God with others. So you actually need intimacy with others to enjoy intimacy with God. Or, and I talk about this quite a bit in the book, some of my best experiences of intimacy with God have actually come through intimacy with creation, enjoying beauty in creation that have just reminded me how beautiful our Creator is, to have scattered beauty all around us. So actually, going out and enjoying creation can be a great way of deepening our connection with God. So they're all interlinked and they all work to each other, and actually they all strengthen each other. So it's not a matter of, right, I'm going to start with the chapters, which is where I do start, on intimacy with God, and then I'm going to move on to intimacy with myself, having done that, and then to others, and then to creation. Actually, we need to be doing all of them at the same time, and helping ourselves see and feel how they all interconnect, and how intimacy in one area will bring intimacy, a deep sense of connection, oneness in other areas too, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so there's a lot of crossover. And I would say I've experienced that myself. 8 years ago, we got a dog, which I thought I was getting for my children because, it's good to learn to care for an animal. But actually, taking the dog out into the forest every day, it took me a little while, but I started to pray, and I started to pray out in the forest as if I would in my bedroom at home. And then I started to pray much more sort of less of a list and more of a just sort of spending time with God. And it was being out in creation that really helped me deepen my relationship with God, or sort of have a new aspect to it in that sense. So I think you're onto something, Ed.
Well, yeah, and I can remember going to a session at some conference years ago about developing a closer relationship with God, and slightly tongue in cheek, but not entirely. The person who did it said, "What you'll need to do is you need to buy a dog." That was his top tip. And obviously other people were saying a dog's not just for Christmas, or a dog's not just for intimacy with God. But I do think he was onto something, and I think I've certainly, living in a city. One of the dangers is that I'm not getting out and enjoying intimacy with creation enough, and that does sometimes, restrict my appreciation of God and His beauty, and it's not good for me spiritually. We had a staff fun day for Emmanuel Bristol yesterday, and we were out in a beautiful part of the countryside near Bristol, and you just thought, I need to do this more, and I need to do this more. And not just for my mental and physical and emotional health. And there's loads of literature nowadays that's, rightly reminding us that being out in the countryside is important for that. But also we need to do it for our spiritual health as well.
That's it. So what sort of dog are you getting?
It would actually be... I have enough problems actually looking after myself. So the thought of also looking after a canine creature as well would be bad. But the principle of just getting out and about is a really good one. And I need to find other ways of doing that. And so, for instance, I know that during the lockdowns, they were very difficult, weren't they? Because I wasn't able to, was a single person living alone. Intimacy with others was just really difficult. But actually, intimacy with creation was quite good, because when we had that hour, I was always out for the full hour. And, really going out to seek beauty in creation, even in an urban environment. And I found it. And I think we all need that thirst for intimacy with creation that can loop back to intimacy with God.
So, Ed, maybe you could tell us, how did you come up with those almost sort of four categories, as it were? Why is it not other things? Why is it God, ourselves, creation, and others?
Well, this book was born in a friendship, actually, a pastoral friendship that I had with a young student when I was doing student work, and he was really struggling with an addiction to pornography. And one of the things we did as we talked through that was, I just at various stages asked him to notice when porn had a total, what were the factors that were in place and what were the things that weren't in place when porn was ruling his life and when actually he was making steps forward and saying no to it. And we just started to sort of make a list of some of the things. And it just became clear that actually when he was enjoying intimacy, a sense of connection with God and with himself and with others and with creation, it had less of a hold on of his life. So we just basically noticed these things. And then I was noticing that in my own life, and noticing that, when I struggle in different ways, it's usually because one or two or three or all four of these things are not there. So they didn't immediately fall into four, but we just noticed that there were all these factors in place and they could be put into these four categories. And from then on, in my pastoring of this young man, and actually in my pastoral care of myself and other people, I'm now always thinking, when I'm trying to help somebody, where are they struggling to find intimacy at the moment? And often it becomes really clear in conversation that it's one of these categories. Most of the time, actually becomes really clear that in all four of these areas, there are some just simple steps that people can do to really help them live life in all its fullness, as Jesus promises us.
Yeah, so, this is not just a book that's interesting for us to find out about how we may or may not be doing in these areas. It's very practical. So, when intimacy is missing, then other problems creep in and other dependencies creep in. So it's great to think that this is so practically addressing some of those deep needs.
We are so excited about Kaleidoscope, the series that gives you the chance to wrestle with big questions about sexuality, gender and faith.
People often ask us, are you kind of living a lie because of my sexuality?
I was always rebelling against this idea of being a female, I think because I felt so different from the other girls.
Kaleidoscope is a video-based series for use in youth groups designed to help young people explore big questions on sexuality, gender and faith.
The actual relationship that I left in order to follow Jesus was with a woman that I intended to spend the rest of my life with.
Each episode has real-life stories, engaging teaching and a panel discussion. And alongside the videos, there's training, episode guides, take-home sheets and a load of bonus material for use before and after the series, giving churches everything they need to help young people explore these big topics.
And when I became a Christian, read the Bible for myself, I saw, no, you know what, there's actually a much bigger story going on here.
We turn to him as sinners, and actually he responds with grace and with love.
So, Ed, is there one of these areas where you struggle personally the most to enjoy intimacy?
I struggle with them all at different times, I think. And, I write books about things I struggle with and not things that I've solved. So, and actually I write to help myself and to help other people. And, at the moment, having written the book and done the publicity that you do when a book's come out, I'm now actually preparing a series of full talks on the book, which I'll have done by the time you listen to this at the Keswick Convention. And basically, it's just good for me because this is something I struggle with. It doesn't say in the back cover, Ed Shaw once experienced the intimacy deficit and now experiences wholeness and connection completely and perfectly all the time. It's not that sort of book. This is me as a fellow Christian talking about areas which I struggle with, sharing some things that have helped me. But also it's really good for me to have to revisit the material and think, actually at the moment, I am struggling in these areas. And I think, for instance, we talked about just before the break, intimacy with creation. I spend 2 weeks a year on the island of Herm, which is one of my favourite places in the world, and it's stunningly beautiful. And I have 2 weeks sort of gorging on intimacy with creation because it's just beautiful, and you're walking around and it's slow and you swim in the sea and it's just beautiful. I come back to Bristol, which is a beautiful city, but I rush around like some sort of maniac and I don't ever really pause and actually reflect on the beauty of God in creation. Or my busyness actually stops me reflecting on the fact that so many of the things that I'm doing in my life are me getting involved in God's work of creation and me fulfilling the plans he's got for my life and using the gifts and his experiences that he's given me to serve others and actually enjoying being me. And that sort of sense is something I don't pause and reflect on enough. And then that has an impact on my intimacy with God and also my intimacy with others. Because again, my big danger is that I rush around doing things and I don't pause and spend time with people in which I'm actually answering their questions about how I'm doing in an honest and open way. And I'm not allowing them to have the time to answer those questions, in response. How are you doing? Which do I struggle with? I struggle with them all the time. And what I'm wanting to do is help other people learn from that struggle and join me in trying to solve the intimacy deficit and recognise that it's just going to be a constant thing. So I'm hoping that the intimacy deficit might be one of those books that you read once and it challenges you and there's some applications which you put into practice, but it actually is something you take off the bookshelf regularly to review how life's going. And actually for me as an author, I've done this material countless times over the last I suppose almost 7-8 years now. And every time I've been back in this material, it's been so good and so refreshing to think through, okay, what's going well, what's not. I used to do that, but that was really helpful. Why has it stopped, etc.
Brilliant. And you've just demonstrated in that as well, again, how interconnected all these things are. Like we're whole people. We're not people split into 4 quadrants. And so the way that a lack of intimacy with creation can then impact your intimacy with other people or your intimacy with God, all of that, it's just really helpful to hear. I think as well, I'm helped by that reflection on on kind of rushing around and busyness. I naturally think, oh, intimacy with creation. I've got that one down quite easily in my life. Just where I live, we've got a really beautiful garden out the back that my brother had landscaped last year. So it's lovely. There's all these flowers and trees, so I can sit out there and enjoy listening to the birds and all of that. And then there's a nature reserve just round the corner, so I can wander through there. So I practically, it's quite easy for me to get out in creation and just see all of the natural world and the things that God has made. But it is very easy for me to be so busy and rushing through life that I don't stop and notice those things, that I don't pause, even in an urban environment, and see the beautiful things that there are there. And as you were reflecting earlier, I was thinking about lockdown as well, and how just going out for those walks every day, just purely to be outside. And I remember pausing and looking at a tree or looking at a butterfly that I just wouldn't have done that normally over the course of my life if I hadn't been forced to slow down. So that one in particular, I think, and that feeds into all the other areas as well. If you're that busy, then you're not stopping to check in with yourself. You're not stopping to connect with your friends. You're not stopping and taking time with God. So yeah, all interconnected, and very helpful to hear that. Is there one that you find comes more naturally to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think some people be listening in and thinking, intimacy with creation, enjoying creation, enjoying beauty in creation. That's just not me. And there will be some people. We do respond to different things. We find different things beautiful. So I know that. I find myself attuned to, physical beauty in pictures, in music, in art, in creation. I do find that such a powerful thing. And I know not everybody's wired in exactly the same way, although I think we're all wired to some extent to sort of make that connection. But I do find that beauty just does make me praise God, make me enjoy Him. I think probably more than a lot of other things, and perhaps more than some other people. So I think one of the things that we all need to do is actually just find the things in creation that most leaders back to God. There's a beautiful quote in the book about how beauty is the sort of it's like in fairy stories, it's the breadcrumb trail that leads you. It's a true beauty is a breadcrumb trail that should lead us back to God, and we perhaps all find different expressions of beauty that are that trail back to God for us.
Brilliant. Coming back to the book, how are people responding to it? Are you hearing people say, "Oh yeah, you've pointed out these breadcrumbs for me"?
Well, I mean, I haven't had anybody sort of saying, "Here's your book, I'm burning it," which is good. I haven't had the friend who last time said that they thought all copies of the book should be pulped, which is good. That feels like a positive. So at the moment, the response is I think people who are reading it are being positive. At church, we've made it our book of the summer, and people at church are competing now with sending me photos of where they're reading it. So I had somebody who was reading it on a sort of cruise of the Mediterranean. So a sort of nice picture of Greek islands in the background. But the winner so far is the person who happened to be on My Favourite Place a couple of weeks ago and took a picture of the book on one of my favourite beaches. So they're winning the competition so far. So I've had a lot of photos. I've had some positive comments. Nobody's wanted to pulp it. Nobody's wanted to burn it. That's about it. I haven't read a review yet, actually. That is always the scary moment, the first time you see a review and you sort of brace yourself and wince slightly often as people make very good criticisms, and then every so often get cross as people make what feel like very unfair criticisms and everything in between.
Hopefully it's character development or something.
That's right. Yeah, all these people that pretend they don't read their reviews. I think everybody does, because you're desperate for a bit of feedback. And actually, I enjoy meeting people who have read the book and read any of my books and different responses. It is actually it's always the nicest thing whenever you've written anything is that somebody actually has read it, even if they hated every word. At least they've read it.
Is there anything already that you're thinking, oh, I wish I'd changed that before we got it sent to print?
I've yet to find the typo. Actually, there's nearly always a typo, and I've got a good friend. He's very good at. I've got a good friend who's such a good proofreader that actually used them for proofreading this book. Because I just thought, rather than them tell me after it's been printed, oh, did you see the typo on page 22? I'd actually get them involved on the proofreading, and I'm hoping that might be the way of avoiding it. I think, I'm already. So actually, in preparing stuff for this year's Keswick Convention, I'm just changing things a bit and using new language because sometimes people have misunderstood, or I found better ways of I think probably making connections. One bit of sort of. There's the whole debate that often goes out when we talk about biblical imagery that is used to describe intimacy with God. One of the great biblical pictures is obviously God as Father, and I've already read a bit of an online debate around is that language appropriate and helpful for those who've had a difficult relationship with their fathers? Isn't it typical of an evangelical like me to uphold the patriarchy by just using father language? And it's just helpful to think that through. I do think the Bible uses the father language. I don't think it's a patriarchal thing. But I do want to recognise, and I do in the book recognise, that some people have had very painful and difficult experiences of their fathers that do need to be redeemed by God, as he shows that he's not like their human fathers, but different in amazing ways. Perhaps, looking back, I should have put something about some of the language where, God shows himself or compares himself to a mother, but I wouldn't want that to sort of wipe clean all the father stuff, because it is the father language that God most consistently uses, and that Jesus most encourages to embrace as we pray to our Father in heaven.
Yeah. So we're about to wrap up this episode, Ed, but maybe looking forward, tell us, how are we going to explore this stuff in this series moving forwards? If people have read the book, is there any point in them listening to this series?
I hope so, because I hope what we're going to do is, the plan is just to take each of these areas in turn. So to talk about intimacy with God, ourselves, others, and creation. And the plan is to have somebody who's read the book in to discuss that from outside the Living Out team, another Living Out team member, and have a conversation. And what I'm really looking forward to finding out is how other people enjoy intimacy with God themselves and others and creation, and to find out what resonated from the book, but also what they would add to the book, in particular actually what they would add to the book when it comes to what's practically worked for them, because it is a personal book. I talk about my own experiences, I talk about what's worked for me. Some of that will work for other people, but I'm really hoping that in conversation with others we'll find out a better range, a deeper range of ways in which people can actually genuinely experience a much better connection in each of those 4 areas. And I'd love to hear different stories as to how people have found them mutually reinforcing. So I'm hoping we'll just be wonderfully helped by having the perspective of different personalities, different responses to the book. So that's the sort of plan over the next 4 episodes of what I'm amused to see is series 13 of the Living Out podcast. So what could go wrong?
But we're not superstitious, are we?
We're not superstitious. No, we're not.
Brilliant. Well, do pick up a copy of Ed's book, enjoy that, and then do tune in for the rest of this series to hear, as he said, more voices chipping into this conversation and expanding on those ideas. And hopefully by the end of it, all of us will be enjoying intimacy in our lives in a far greater depth. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Joe. Good to chat with you today. We'll stick some resources in the show notes that might be helpful to you. Thank you for listening. Do subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss one. Do share it with anyone who you think it might benefit, and come back in a couple of weeks for our next episode. We'll speak to you then. Bye for now.